Welcome to the channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. So for this video, it's going to be quite anticipated. A lot of you guys wanted a full comparison between pretty much all the Pelagos homages out there. Now this is in particular the Pelagos 39. So there's a couple of things which the watches I've chosen have to have because I want to compare as like for like as I possibly can. So you guys are aware I did do the review on the Seestern, which was sent to me for free. Now I had to go and purchase the Octopus Kraken and the IX&DAO. Now the IX&DAO came out a few weeks after the Octopus Kraken, or after the Seestern, sorry. I'm not 100% sure in the exact order they came out in, and I opted to choose the IX&DAO, which is why it's taken a bit of time for me to kind of start doing this video. Now, there's also another contender which I didn't include, which is a San Martin collaboration with Watch Dives. And now, while the specs are a bit confusing because they have done a titanium version, however, I'm pretty sure the Pelagos style watch that they did, that wasn't titanium, and also the color that you have with the matte black dial, I felt it was a little bit too different. So I don't want to be comparing kind of apples to oranges in this comparison, which is why the three watches that I've chosen all look pretty much exactly the same. So they all have that sun ray pattern on the bezel insert, which is what I'm looking for, and also that very subtle sun ray on the black dial, which is what I think the Pelagos 39 brought to us. They had very particular set of finishing available on the watches. So you can see I've got my notes ready, and this will be a three-parter, so I'm gonna have to break this down. Otherwise this video is going to be at least 45-50 minutes, because we tend to think, and it's one of the questions I want to answer, that all these Homage watches come from the same factory. And while that is the case for a lot of watches, so we're talking about Steel Dives and Addy's Dive and things like that, the findings that I have in front of me indicate that they're from different places. Or I don't know, it's a tough one, right? Because there is that ambiguity when we look at watches out of China. So this video is just going to be on the specifications and dimensions alone, and the prices, and that's going to take us to the full length of the video. The next part is going to be the dial and the case, if I can fit them in together, but I found so many differences. You guys will be shocked at the amount of differences I found. And then at the end is going to be the bracelet and kind of summarizing it all up, because again, down to the bracelet, there's so many differences. So let's go ahead. I've got my notes here, and you can see I've got the part one all written out on my handy little tablet. So the next one is going to be part two if it decides to work, and you can see question marks, right? Because I don't want you guys to know anything yet on the dial or the case. So let's go back to specifications, and of course dimensions. So this thing does glitch sometimes. It's not really making it look any good, is it? So let's go on to the Seestern, and we've got the Octopus Kraken. Okay, and as I showed you guys, we've got the IX&DAO. So this is, I think, the next watch from the IPOS Homage, the Serica Homage, sorry. So they are quite promising in what they're bringing us. So in terms of specifications, all three watches have the exact same specifications with regards to the sapphire crystal, the ceramic bezel insert, etc. 200 meters of water resistance rating. They all have titanium, and they all come on bracelets, and they all have automatic movements. Now, where they differ is the Seestern has an NH38, the particular one I have in hand. They also offer a ST2130 watch, which in hindsight now I should have opted for the higher grade movement or the higher tier movement, because the other two watches have both PT5000 movements in there. Now, the only other difference in terms of spec wise there is that the Octopus Kraken on the PT5000 has a ghost position, because obviously it's a dateless watch. But the IX&DAO with the PT5000, they've done something surprising here. This does not have a ghost position at all, so they've modified this PT5000. And the only difference with the IX&DAO is in terms of spec, it only has a 60 click bezel, whereas the other two have a 120 click bezel. Now, before we go into dimensions, let's talk about pricings here. So price wise, the Seestern with the NH38 is £220, and just FYI, the ST2130 is £235. But at 220 is closest to the other watches with the PT5000. So the Octopus Kraken comes in at 228, and the IX&DAO comes in at 220. I'll put up the conversion on screen for you guys so you're not lost. So we already see a bit of a difference in price. So some would say the PT5000 is probably better value than the NH38. I do disagree, and someone commented on this. I don't think a higher B is necessarily better. I still think the NH38 is a proven and tested movement. So even if it's a lower beat, a lot of you guys would definitely prefer reliability over, you know, the fancy high beat that the PT5000 gives. Now, the PT5000 does have very known issues down to oiling, and because these movements are out of a factory in China, you do have a lot of QC issues within the movement, which does affect reliability and longevity, even though there's plenty of cases where they run very, very accurately. So when you get a good one, it's really good. When you get a bad one, it is very shitty. So now let's talk about dimensions. Now, one thing about the diameter measurement, I find it very difficult to get a consistent actual measurement of the case. As you know, with the crowns at 3 o'clock, it's very difficult to get a very accurate measurement, and I was getting very different readings across all 3 watches because I couldn't find the exact same spot to measure them. Now, I'm sure there's probably a nifty little way to do it. So what I've decided to do is measure the diameter from the width of the watch, including the crown and also the bezel. So these are the 2 measurements we're going to take because those gave me the most consistency. So with regards to the Seestern, the diameter including the crown was 42.9 millimeters and 39.8 at the bezel. The Octopus was 41.5 millimeters across, including crown, and 38.9 at the bezel. The IX&DAO was 42.7 millimeters across and 39.8 at the bezel alone. Now for the thickness, the Seestern was 12.2, the Octopus Kraken was 11.6, and the IX&DAO was 11.5. Now the Seestern obviously is going to be a bit thicker because of the use of the NH38. I don't know to hand exactly what the thickness would be on the ST2130. Lug to lug on all 2 watches is 46.8 millimeters on the Seestern, 45.8 on the Octopus Kraken, and 46.7 on the IX&DAO. Now, of course, they all got female end links on the bracelets, which gives us a really good lug-to-lug reading. But I chose to measure from the actual lug tip to lug tip and not from the center. Bracelets on the female end links do actually sit just under the lugs, so I went for the total length of the case. Weight-wise, 100 grams for the Seestern, 107 for the Octopus Kraken, and 110 for the IX&DAO. So you can really see dimensions is a very good indicator of how different things are. They are all very different with slight variations. The Seestern and the IX&DAO are the closest on dimensions, minus the thickness on the Seestern due to the NH35. So one would make an observation that they probably are the most similar in terms of, you know, what we see in terms of dimensions and the case design over the Octopus Kraken. That's actually the smallest one that we have. And also the IX&DAO only has a 60 click unidirectional bezel, whereas the other 2 have 120 click. But the IX&DAO comes with a no ghost position. So that's a lot to weigh up. And as I said, the pricing is very competitive. 220 for NH38, 228 from the Octopus Kraken, and the 220 from the IX&DAO. So I'm going to leave it there today, guys. I think this is enough of information to kind of soak in, and I'll do a part 2 where I'll break down the dial, the differences in there, and there are so many differences, including the bezel insert. Obviously, we'll cover the bezel rotation, the loom, and we'll also move on to the case. Just one note I want to add in there: if you guys are still feeling pretty bummy that the San Martin was not included, then let me know in the comment section, because what I'll aim to do then is get the San Martin in, and the winner out of these 3, or the best one I feel, I'll compare that next to the San Martin to hopefully keep you guys happy. If you're in the UK and you've got the San Martin collaboration with Watch Dives, let me know in the comment section, or, you know, reach out to me on email and please send that in. I'd love to get that in. You can just buy it to me for a couple of days. If not, then I'll reach out to one of the sub stores on Aliexpress and get one in just for this purpose. So that's it from me today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to keep up to date with this crazy comparison that I'm going to do, and I'll see you on the next video.